Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. I'm Jim, joined by David and Dale, and we're going to be going through a Virginia Tech NFL draft and season preview. But before we do that, Dale, it's Monday. How you doing?
I'm doing good for a Monday, right? You can only be so good on a Monday, but yeah, not too bad.
How could you have a bad Monday if you're a teacher and it's the middle of the summer?
It's routine, man. I'm a routine guy. I like having my routine. Then you got to build a whole new routine in the summer, and then you get used to that routine, and it's time to start back.
Yeah. And David, you live in Virginia covering the Eagles, and you also cover Virginia Tech. So how long have you been covering Virginia Tech?
3 years. Yeah, just 3 years. And I'm like Dale, I like the routines too. I'm good to go on Mondays though. I'm still amped up from all my weekend rest. It's Wednesdays and Thursdays I hate. I hate the end towards the week, but yeah, I've only been doing that for 3 years though.
Cool. Well, Virginia Tech is one of David's schools. So when one of the draft professors says, I want to cover this school, we cover that school. And at the top of the Virginia Tech draft eligible list is quarterback Kyron Drones. So, Dale, what did you have on Drones?
So I got him at 6'2", 234 is what he listed at, which is a very thick build for a quarterback. And you can tell that with like his running style. He does run the ball quite a bit for them. He's tough to bring down. As a runner, I wouldn't say, okay, this guy's got breakaway speed or the most explosive guy in the world, but he knows how to run the football. He knows how to get first downs, and he can break some tackles with that thick lower body that he has. As far as a passer, I think he's a decent playmaker out of structure, fairly accurate when given a clean pocket. Sometimes I think he does struggle dealing with pressure. I mean, he does a decent job keeping his eyes open, but I think he could stay in the pocket a touch longer. He had 10-6 was his touchdown to interception ratio last year, and the year before it was 17-3. So those numbers obviously have to improve. He needs to put up more touchdowns passing, and he needs to throw less interceptions. And even that 6 interceptions, I thought he put the ball in harm's way far too often for me to really like. I've kind of got him as more of like a late day 3 kind of guy right now on my draft board. I do think there's some natural talent there. He's got a decent arm, and like I said, the dual threat ability with his running ability is good. But he's going to have to put the ball in harm's way a lot less. And I also worry about injuries. So even at Baylor, I think he had some injuries. And then last year he missed some time. I have that in here. Stress fracture and turf toe. So I think he had multiple injuries toward the end of last season and couldn't finish out the season for Tech. I think he came back for one game maybe against Clemson of their last like 3 or 4 games. And but that's all he played. So there's a lot of things to like, but it's also one of those guys to where I'm very hesitant to jump him up very high to even a mid-round pick right now. He's got to prove it to me in another season.
David, what did you have on Kyron Drones?
I think Dale hit on a lot of it. In a perfect world, he could be your 7th or 8th quarterback in next year's draft. I mean, I think he has that kind of potential there. He's a dual threat, like Dale mentioned. He has, average field vision. He's mobile. He gets in and out of the pocket well. And he has been dealing with injuries. And he was on a pitch count this spring. In fact, he sat out the rest of the spring due to a minor medical procedure. And they haven't really stated much about that. So I don't know, what's all involved with that. They say he'll be back by the end of the season. But before the season. But he's going, he's got some obstacles to overcome in addition to just, his skill set. They have a new offensive coordinator with Philip Montgomery, who's going to be, playing a big role. He's going to have to stay healthy. He's going to have to learn a new offense, and he needs to improve some things like, his deep ball accuracy. And like Dale mentioned, his field vision there, he has put the ball in harm's way. And he's also going to have to overcome a whole lot of new faces on the offensive line. They just went through a complete breakdown of that. So I think the pedigree is there. I mean, his cousin is Cam Ward, so there's that. But it should be interesting to see where he goes. I think the future is bright for him if everything falls into place perfectly. But he's got a lot of work to do, and he's learning a brand new offense is not the easiest thing to do on the fly, especially when you're missing the spring.
Yeah, and he's got to stay healthy, first and foremost, I think, before anything else. And they had a guy who was getting some snaps. Who's the backup last year that ended up having to play? And I think they kind of like that kid. He's younger. He's not going to be on the draft radar, but it is something. If he's dinged up, you almost got to worry about, like, okay, could this kid, if he's not ready to go week one, does this kid come out and ball out in his second season there?
Yeah, I was just watching him.
Yeah, I can't. It's Pop something, right? He's got a nickname like.
I think his name's William Watson, and he goes by Pop. I think is his nickname. But yeah, he did play and participate in a lot of the drills I saw, and you're right, they are high on him. I mean, I think a lot has to go wrong for Drones in order to see Pop, but
I agree. But if he's not healthy, I think, that could be the avenue to where they're just like, hey, we trust in this kid, so we'll ride with him a little longer than we might. Yeah.
100%.
Okay. And then, so both of you have Drones right now at the back of day 3, if he's draftable at all. Is that a fair summary of where he is?
Prior going into the season, yeah.
Yeah, that's where I've kind of got him more like, 6th, 7th round to undrafted. Just kind of depends who ends up coming out. That's always a big part of it. There's generally around 10 quarterbacks on average that are drafted in a draft. So I think depending who comes out could be a part of that too. But, he is a senior, so this should be his last season. Yeah, I would say 6th, 7th round right now, but definitely has the natural talent with the dual threat ability.
Cool. So the next player, Dale, who's the next, or I should say, who's the highest Virginia Tech player on your board?
The guy I have is a transfer from West Virginia, and that's Tomas Rimac. So 6'6", 318. He's played pretty much exclusively at left guard for West Virginia. He had a 82.3 pass block grade last year and a 77.3 run block grade. Now, I think part of that is because of West Virginia's offense and their offensive line, right? They have guys that typically grade out really well. It's just how they run it. But he's a pretty solid player. And even him, right now I'm looking more like 4th, 5th round kind of range. I don't really have him as a day 2 guy, but I think he could work his way into that. He's played over 2,000 snaps, so tons of experience, and that shows durability as well. He's a pretty good athlete on tape. But like I mentioned, he has played almost exclusively at left guard, and I don't know how thick his lower body is. Like, even though he's listed at 318, he seems kind of like thin and light in his lower body. I notice a lot of balance issues off tape, or he'll reach and then he'll stumble, or he'll completely miss. So I think part of that too, with the strike timing and his hand placement, that needs some work. But and he struggled a bit I didn't think he played very well against Penn State. So that was a game I tried to watch, one of the higher competition for West Virginia last year. But there is a lot to like because he can get out, move, he can block on the move, he can get to the second level and block, and he's got tons of experience. So he's a guy I'm looking at like maybe 4th, 5th round kind of range as of now, as just kind of an early grade / ranking spot for him.
David, what did you have on Tomas? And are we saying it Rimac?
Rimac, yeah. One of the more notable changes the Hokies made this offseason is when they hired offensive line coach Matt Moore, which that's where, Rimac comes from. Moore is very familiar with him. So that was like step 1 in trying to rebuild the trenches. Again, like I mentioned, they lost a lot of offensive linemen. I believe it was eight of them. Last season, I think Pro Football Focus had him ranked at 77.1 overall, but a pretty decent 86.3 pass blocking grade. Like Dale said, he does have pretty good feet, as far as getting to the next level. He's used leverage well in pass pro, and he's going to be counted on to be their left guard this year, I believe. I mean, that's mainly where he's played. I think that's where he will, end up there. He has 29 career collegiate starts. He only allowed 9 pressures last year, which was pretty good. So, I have him about the same, place, going into the preseason. I'll just preemptively say that about every player. I root for all of these guys to elevate from round 7 to round 1. I wish they all could do that, but I have about a 4th, 5th, somewhere in that 150-ish range, I guess, right now. But he's going to be someone they're counting on this year. It was one of the players that after they got, Matt Moore in there that they wanted to bring in to solidify that line.
Yeah, and I think a lot of teams would have loved to pick him up in the portal. Everybody's looking for offensive linemen, and he just as high as he was graded, and the athleticism and the durability and everything, all the experience he has. So, I think Virginia Tech, obviously him following the coach, but I think they're very happy that they were able to land him in the portal.
Okay. And Dale, who is your next highest graded Virginia Tech player?
And it gets a little tougher after this, so I'll kind of go in the order I have, but I don't have very many of these guys necessarily with draftable grades because I either kind of have them with 2027 early on right now. And the first one's probably Benji Gosnell. So the tight end, 6'5", 254. I've seen him listed anywhere from like 240 to 254, but I'm going to go with Virginia Tech's website where it says 254 and go with that, which he looks like he's a little thicker and probably 254. He doesn't look that thin when he's out there. He's got very reliable hands. So I think for his career, his drop rate's only at like 4.3%. You can move him around formation a little bit. So good alignment versatility. And he had a good production last year with 32 catches, 341 yards. I mean, that's solid for a tight end. Anytime you're talking tight ends, you're not talking receivers. So you're not looking for these guys. Yeah, you got your special guys, your Tyler Warrens, your Brock Bowers that are going to put up some more yards. But your typical tight end getting you 300 or 400 yards is a pretty damn good season for a tight end, just for everyone wondering. He is entering his redshirt junior season. So, and a lot of times with tight ends, I feel like they'll play till their senior year. So I kind of have him as a 2027 guy is why he's not necessarily in the draft guy. But if he's balling out and it's halfway through the season, then I'm going to be moving that profile over to 2026 and having him in there. That's just kind of how I do my draft guide. He's a former quarterback in high school, and he also played linebacker. So you talk about toughness, a guy that played both ways in high school and being a linebacker tells you a lot about him. I think he needs to improve a little more as a blocker. I'm not saying he's awful in that area, but he could get better in that area to be a more complete tight end. And he's a tough runner after the catch. I wouldn't say he's super elusive or explosive after the catch. He's not probably a top-tier athlete, but I think he's a solid athlete with his background of quarterback, linebacker. Plus, he's tough to bring down. I do think that's why I do think he's closer to that 254 because he's a tough runner, and once he gets the ball in his hands, he's going to fight for extra yards.
David, did you have anything on Gosnell?
Dale pretty much nailed everything that I had. I didn't get a chance to see him in the spring as he was attending a wedding for one of his 12 siblings.
His brother was on the team last year, right? Because I kept seeing his brother making plays.
Yeah, so that's kind of wild. But yeah, the biggest thing is the connection between Drones and Benji is pretty good. I mean, you can tell he uses them out as an outlet. He's comfortable throwing with them. And he's shown good hands. He's got decent size, like Dale mentioned. He can break tackles. If he improves his run blocking this year, I think he will ascend up some draft boards. So I think that might dictate whether he is 26 or 27, just how much he develops this season.
Yeah, and I think we're going to hit a couple more skill players as we go through this podcast. So I think the Virginia Tech skill players as a collective group can elevate each other. Dale, where do you have Terion Stewart, the running back, on your board?
So he's a guy who honestly I just hadn't watched a ton of till we started talking about Virginia Tech guys. And he's played at Bowling Green, so he wasn't at Virginia Tech previously. Obviously, they had the running back I'm blanking on that everybody loved, the speedster. Yes, Bashal Tootin. But yeah, Stewart, he's 5'9", 220. When you put on the tape, he doesn't even look 5'9" to me. I'm like, is this guy 5'7", 5'6"? Like, he is small, but he is stocky. He's one of those guys like the Bengals drafted Taj Brooks, and it makes me think of him a little bit with that thick build. So he had 898 rushing yards for Bowling Green last year with 6 touchdowns. He is limited as a receiver, only 5 catches through 4 seasons. So I think I watched the game where he had the 1 catch. He had 1 catch all of last season. I'm like, well, there's the 1 catch then, because it's on this game I'm watching. But very, like I said, thickly built, but he's got quick feet too, which is something that makes me think of Taj Brooks as well. Like he moves better than you'd think. He's got a little more elusiveness out in the open field, can make pretty good cuts in the open field. And then with that 220, man, just those tree trunk legs, you know, and that stocky build, he's tough to bring down. He's got the natural low center of gravity. He was fun. And I'm like, I don't know where to put him when I do add him to the draft guide. So I am curious to hear you guys' thoughts on him, because I was like, I kind of really like this kid, you know, and I don't think it's near the running back class that it was this past season by any means from what I've seen so far. So he's a guy I think, could he elevate, especially moving up in competition to Virginia Tech? I think absolutely. He's got a chance to skyrocket up, you know, maybe be a 4th, 5th round guy. Yeah, he's not going to have the great size. He's probably not going to be an every down, but he's got the stocky build. He's going to stick his nose in there to block when he needs to. And he's going to be a tough runner that can get you the short yardage, but he's also got a little bit of ability to hit a home run every now and then, a little more speed than you'd think.
David, how about you? Where did you have him?
Yeah, I have a 4th or 5th on him as well. I thought it was a very clever transfer to go, you know, fill Tootin's shoes there with Virginia Tech. He, like Dale mentioned, he is a portal transfer from Bowling Green, who will likely be at the very least one half of, you know, the person who's taken over that role for the Hokie offense. He'll be competing against Braden Bennett, I think. But whoever gets the lion's share of that starting job has a pathway for 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. Stewart is strong. He's a powerful runner. He's improved year after year. I think he could be on the cusp of having a breakout in Blacksburg if he can, you know, wrestle that job to himself. He has the potential to take the ball to the house every time he touches it. Some of his better performances were against the teams that, you know, were some of the top talent. He's shown excellent, you know, balance. He has this very strong core, which assists him in breaking the tackles. If he can stay healthy, his downhill running style could be leaned on. You know, he could end up being a lead back there. And if that happens, as you saw with Tootin last year, sky's the limit, you know. So he's one of the guys I'm most interested to see how he develops this season.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Like, I think even though maybe he's not the highest guy, because I didn't have him in the draft guide before, you know, we started this, and then when this is what I enjoy about this too, because then I get names from Jim and, you know, the other draft professors, and able to like, okay, yeah, I've heard that name. Yes, I need to look into him more, and it's like this makes me do it, you know. So I watched him and I was like, oh man, I really like this kid, and there's just something about him that he might end up being like my top rated of the guys. So even though right now he's not, because he's not necessarily in the draft guide, I think I enjoyed watching his tape more than anything, more than any of the other guys.
And Dale, I agree with you. I think at this time of the draft cycle is where I see, let's say there's a lot more collaboration, because everybody wants to know, have I watched all the right players? So interestingly, I didn't go to my day job today. I stayed home because I put together the entire fall podcast, like here's the players we cover each podcast kind of thing. And I just checked Terion Stewart didn't make the cut, but I had room for 5 more running backs, so I just added him. So this is going to be like, I think at this point, where are we at? We're at 36 running backs on our board that we're tracking for the season, and that feels low kind of thing, right? Because about 25 get drafted, and a few of those guys are going to get hurt, which means somebody's going to rise. So it's a let's say it's a little dance we do with, you know, there's 4 or 5 draft professors that have shared with me their boards, and you don't always want to take one person's grades, or if Terion Stewart wasn't on those boards, he didn't get added to the list until just now. So this is definitely, for me, this is the fun part of the draft season. Yeah. It's just trying to see, are we watching all the right players? That's why I also like the idea that we can deep dive into specific universities. So I'm going to dive down, and I know from talking pre-show, Virginia Tech has a new wide receiver, and his name is Donovan Green. And they got him in the portal. And David, you said that you had a chance to talk to the coach about Donovan Green. You want to share with us what you had on him?
Yeah. I say the same thing. I feel like every player we talk about, to preemptively state this, I think Virginia Tech has 30 portal transfer players. So it seems like everybody we mentioned, I'm saying he's a Wake Forest transfer. Oh, he's a Bowling Green transfer. But yeah, Donovan is a Wake Forest transfer, and he is a burner who has a serious vertical threat. He's shown good hands, crisp route running when he's on the field. He has the opportunity with the Hokies to make an immediate impact. The wide receiver room is filled with transfers. I don't know that there's one holdover. I think the whole room is transfers. But none of them have the experience that he's bringing. If he can stay healthy, he could be a breakout player for them. Of the players mentioned that they had brought in through the portal, he was one of the 4 that the coach mentioned. So they're very excited to bring him in, and he should bring a dynamic, ability to the offense that otherwise is not going to be there. If that deep threat's not coming from him, I don't know where it's coming from on the outside this season.
Yeah, they lost Jalen Lane to the draft as well.
Right.
Yeah.
He looks like an older.
Go ahead, Dale.
I was just gonna. I haven't really watched him too much, Jim, and I shared that with you. But so just looking at kind of his stats for his career. So his first season was 2019. He missed all of 2021. So I'm assuming that's probably injury, unless he transferred from somewhere besides Wake Forest before. So he's a little older guy. This would be basically his 6th year, including that one he missed. It looks like, looking at his yards per catch, he's had seasons with 19, 20 yards per catch, 17, 16. So we're talking about a burner speed, but he's also listed at 6'2", 210. So that's good size there. And he's had seasons with 500, almost 600 yards, almost 650. Then last season, he only had 380. So it's been a little up and down on production, but you're talking about a guy who has produced. If he's got that speed plus that size, that's definitely somebody. And there's that opening for him to come in there and be their number 1 receiver.
Yes, let me piggyback on that. So 6'2", 210. That's, I would say, prototypical wide receiver size.
Yeah.
So already he's going to be from on the NFL radar, prototypical size. In addition to that, he has speed. So there's athletic ability. And again, that's a trait that you can't coach, right? You either have it or you don't. So as we were going through, it was actually just funny story on Donovan Green specifically. So I had put together the wide receiver scouting reports for the draft professor. It was the second position I did. And I was communicating with Bill Sparks, and then Bill's like, well, this guy's hurt. This guy's hurt. You need to add Donovan Green in. Right? And it had nothing to do with producing this podcast. He's like, Bill knows we have 64 spots to cover players on a podcast. He said, you're going to take these 3 receivers out, and Donovan Green's one of the ones that you're putting in. So Bill hadn't watched Green when we were first building the podcast list. But somewhere between that point in time and this morning, he had watched Donovan Green. And Bill knew that was a player that he wanted to track through the draft cycle as well. So I would say Donovan Green, just hot take, if he plays with any level of, how do I want to say this? If he stands out within the first 2 or 3 weeks, he's probably going to have a Ty Felton-like rise of draft boards, right? Because last year, I think Ty Felton moved up after, leading the Big Ten in touchdowns after 3 or 4 weeks into the season. So Donovan Green, I think, is primed to be shooting up draft boards, and you may have heard him here first. So just remember that for all of you in the chat. Dale, who is the next highest player that you have?
It's another guy I think could be 2027. It's Dante Lovett, but 6'1", 190. So he's got very nice size, length. He's played kind of rotational snaps more than anything because they've had Mansour Delane. They've had Dorian Strong, one guy in the NFL, one guy at LSU now. And he's just now entering his true junior season. So he's still a very young guy. And you can understand, okay, that's why he hasn't played a ton of snaps. But he had a 65.1 coverage grade last year and only allowed 40% completion rate against, which is phenomenal. So when he did play, he was pretty tough to complete passes against. It's really about all about how he does now, how consistent is he, if he's in this class or the next one, because I think the talent's there, but he only has 300 career snaps. So now that he's in a featured role, he's basically, to me, probably going to be their number one corner. So he's going to, hopefully be shutting down one side of the field or making some big plays for them. But I do like the length. I think he has good ball skills. I don't think he has a lot of interceptions, but you see the ball skills with his ability to get his hands on balls and make plays on balls and break on the balls. And he's been very good on special teams. So already having that, we know you love LSU chop. We're going to get to it for you eventually too. We're going to get to LSU for you, brother.
David, what did you have? I love it.
A lot of what he just said. Tech's starting corners last year were Strong, who's now with Buffalo Bills, as you're well aware, Jim. Delane transferred to LSU, which positions Dante to be CB1 in 2025. He does have above average ball skills despite, it not showing up on the back of a football card on the stat sheet there. But he demonstrates agility. He's got quick feet, good recovery, fluid hips. His ability to recognize routes and bully receivers is kind of one of his stronger parts of the game. Some have wondered if he would be better suited to move to safety, where he could utilize his strength and tackling prowess, a little bit more. But he has the ability and opportunity to prove he can compete against opposing teams' best receivers this season. So everybody would rather be CB most of the time. So that's where he's going to, try
where
to
the money
stay.
is.
Absolutely. So his opportunity is right in front of him. This fell into his lap with the transfer from, Delane to LSU to be CB1 on that team. So all eyes are on Dante, but I agree, if he struggles even a little bit, it'll be 2027 before you see him.
Yeah.
Okay, so David, you hit on a question that I had, and that's he was listed as a defensive back. He wasn't listed as corner, and he wasn't listed as safety. What do you think his best position or the first position he's going to be?
Well, I think they're going to try him first at CB1, but there is talk that just with his strength and he can get beat on certain routes. So I think that they're going to watch him closely. That's why I think this year will make or break that for him, because if he doesn't succeed in that role early on in the season, it'll probably be another year of learning a different position next season, because they are, wondering, but which spot is best suited for him. But at the same time, like I said at the beginning, and Dale mentioned, they lost both of their starting corners. So they're, somebody on the roster is going to have to fill that spot. So I think he's getting one of the first cracks at it.
Yeah, and I think they're going to give him every shot to be an outside corner, because I see some Duffers said, does that mean safety/nickel corner? I think he's going to have every shot to be like an outside corner and then go from there. And then, maybe he would fill that role. And he's just filled different roles with different snaps at different times because they've had that other talent in front of him. Exactly. But I think even his body type, I think it sets up for him to still be an outside corner. But if he does struggle, it is probably in the back of their heads that they could move him to safety. But I think he's, outside corner all day long as of right now.
Yeah, I think he's getting definitely the first shot at CB1 this summer.
Okay, I also want to give a shout out to Dante Lovett because he liked the podcast. So as we were doing some of the tweets ahead of the podcast, he specifically liked one of the tweets I sent out. So Dante Lovett, if you are listening to the podcast, do you have a preferred position? Corner, slot, safety? You can either drop it into the chat or find me on Twitter, because you already found me once. Just let me know, and I'll either share the tweet on the podcast or something to that effect. But every once in a while, players do listen in to find out what draft professors have to say about them. So Dante Lovett, if you are listening, feel free to comment about the draft professor assessments of your play accurate? We have not quoted any birthdays, so we shouldn't have any negative comments, David.
No, not at all. No, and I think he's going to be able to handle the position. I think they're relying on it. I think they're counting on it. I think they completely felt that way right after Delane went in the portal. They, all full go ahead is with him. But like anybody playing in any sport at any level, you're going to have to prove it on the field. So the opportunity's right there for him right now.
Yeah, and for anybody that didn't catch the inside joke, so when David and I and a few other draft professors were podcasting last fall, we misquoted a player's age, and the player's mother was very direct at correcting us right after the podcast that what her son's real birthday was. So,
but the reason we were wrong is because the college institution had his birthday incorrectly.
Yes.
Posted on their website.
Yeah, you just pass the blame back onto them, and it's their fault.
Luckily, she knew that was the reason, and was pretty cool about the whole situation.
She was not mean about it. She just corrected it.
Right.
Right. And I thanked her for correcting it, and we apologized, but she was cool about it. But at the same time, it still generated a comment. Right? It still generated a comment. So, okay, so I'm looking. Do we have any more offensive players? I think.
Well, not really, but we might have a special teams guy to get to.
Oh yeah. So Dale, go ahead and talk about the kicker. Go for it.
Oh, I'll let David talk about him. I'll let David go first because I know he likes him quite a bit too.
Yeah. He made every extra point last year. In fact, I think he's 89 for 89 in his career. I think he's made all of them. He was 16 of 18 on field goals. I think it said he was 5 for 5 from 40 to 49 and 3 of 4 from 50 plus, which is pretty impressive. He also hit a 60-yarder versus Minnesota last year. So that's pretty much, all you need to hear to know that he is draftable, which, I don't like to spend a lot of time ever looking at punters or kickers. I joked in the chat, I spent a lot of time on a field with punters with a stopwatch in my hand when they would boom them into the sun, and I'm staring, my eyes are watering, and I'm clicking a button. I have no interest to ever do that again, but it was worth mentioning because he is draftable. He keeps up this type of success. You might see him at the end of the draft next year going to, I don't know, Buffalo, Philly.
And for everybody listening, it's kicker John Love. I don't know that we had actually ever said John Love's name. Yep. It's not just he's a kicker, it's kicker John Love.
Kicker does have a name. This kicker's name is John Love. 5'11", 180, redshirt junior. So he wouldn't necessarily have to come out this year. But he's had a really good career already so far. Like you said, no missed extra points. The 88.9% is what that 16 for 18 breaks down to. And the 60-yarder, if you're consistent with the deep ones, you're consistent with the extra points. I mean, the NFL is going to love that because there's a lot of inconsistencies as kickers in the NFL. So, I definitely think you're probably not going to talk about a ton of kickers ever on this show, Jim, but this is one worth mentioning because he may be one of those few that you see special teams players each season.
Yep.
He might be one of them to have in your mock drafts at some point.
And my team has had kicker issues in the playoffs for like a quarter of a century. So I'm all about you have to have a kicker that can kick in December and January. That's like critical.
Do you go back to like the 91 Super Bowl with that, Jim? Like that far back?
Yes. Yeah. And I know that was more than 25 years ago, but don't do that. Don't do that. That was a senior. I was a senior in high school then. That was my senior year. Yes.
Always felt
great
for that
memories.
Guy.
Great memories, right?
Always felt for that guy though. Really good dude, man. Felt bad for him.
Yep. Okay, so we have several defensive players that we are going to be mentioning. Dale, is there any defensive player that you want to start with?
We'll start with Kelvin Gilliam, if that's all right. 6'3", 295, entering redshirt senior year. It's his second year with Virginia Tech. Did spend 3 seasons at Oklahoma. So obviously you're a D tackle. You go to Oklahoma. They produce usually some pretty good D tackles. So that tells you what kind of recruit he was. 60.9 pass rush grade last year, 70.3 run defense grade. He had 19 pressures on the season, 35 tackles, 1 sack. So not a ton of sack production, but Just watching him, he's a high effort player. He has good quickness off the snap, but at times, if he doesn't win quickly, I think he had trouble disengaging from blocks, and probably needs to add a little more pass rush moves to his skill set there. To have more secondary moves, maybe a little better hand usage, because he just didn't do a lot if he didn't win right away. So right now I'd say he's probably an undrafted type player, but maybe a late round type flyer. But he could hopefully have his best season for Virginia Tech, because they're going to need it from him.
And did you have anything on Gilliam, David?
Yeah, I've actually known who he was since he was in high school. One of the high schools in my area that I watched a lot of players from, Highland Springs, he came out of there, and he led the defense that year in 2019, I think it was, to an 11-1 record. I've paid close attention to them lately because the Eagles have had Mekhi Becton came out of Highland Springs, Kayvon Wallace came out of Highland Springs. So they've had some talent coming out of that area lately. So they're one of the high schools who compete for, state titles, et cetera. So you kind of pay more attention to him. But he's pretty good, strong upper body, maintains leverage good. He sheds blocks good. He gets the most from his talent because he's a very high effort guy. So that's what's going to set him apart. His talent, is kind of raw. His traits and skill sets, I think, are above average. And he can benefit from coaching and another year just honing his craft. Once he adds more to his pass rushing repertoire, I think his closing speed and just his motor will take his game to new heights. He just needs a few more tools in the belt, in my opinion. And I think if he can add those this year, he could be drafted later in the draft. I'm excited to see his development. Again, I've rooted for him all the way back in high school. So I probably say it too much. I'm one of the nicer people. I don't like giving anybody a grade that says they're not going to be drafted. I root for everybody to be drafted, sure. Man. So
you're the Oprah Winfrey of draft grades. Yeah. Everybody gets drafted.
Yeah, you get a team. Yeah.
Well, they lost Aeneas Peebles at D tackle, so he's going to have to fill some of that production. They lost Antoine Powell-Ryland, so they've got a lot of pieces on that D line where they're going to be looking at him to kind of be the guy on that D line. So he's going to have every opportunity to show that he can be that kind of guy and have a great season, and definitely earn his way up draft boards for sure.
Absolutely.
And then another defensive lineman who I believe has transferred into Virginia Tech is Edge Ben Bell. And David, did you have anything on Ben Bell?
I have very little of what somebody told me. I have not seen him play. Somebody told me he was an older prospect. I am not even going anywhere with his age. I have no idea what it is. I'm not going to guess, as we mentioned earlier. But with the former Texas State.
This guy. He's got an elite photo.
That's incredible hair.
Yes, it is.
From Texas State, they said he has a really good motor. He's a good pass rusher. They said he was used in a wide 9 alignment over the last 2 seasons. PFF graded him really well. In 2013, he had 513 snaps with a 90.9 defensive rating, a 93.0 pass rush, and last season, a 80.8 defensive score and a 91.1 pass rush. So he has some traits. He has some ability. Again, he's one of the 30 transfers, this whole team. They have a new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. It's just, it's hard to project what's going to happen this year. It's just so many new moving parts, but you root for anybody who can have a hair like that. So
absolutely. Elite facial hair, elite hair.
We're all jealous.
Well, I'm going to add on Bell. So as I was prepping the podcast, he was one of the few players that other people within our, let's say, draft sphere were talking about. So between the grades that David mentioned, and then, one of the things we were talking about before the show began is at this time of year, we're still trying to make sure that we've watched the right players. So I would say that Ben Bell is a player that you at least want to have on your board, you want to give a preliminary watch to, and then as the season progresses, that's a player that we should be monitored.
Yeah, so he's 6'2", 250, and he only played 3 games last year. So if you look at like his production, he had 3.5 sacks, but he got injured and decided to take a redshirt season. So once he was injured after a few games, he took a redshirt season. So if you look, the year before he had 10 sacks, last year only 3.5. Well, that was in 3 games before he was injured. So he was on pace to have another highly productive season. And now, obviously, there's a reason Virginia Tech would want to bring a guy like this in, even though he's been injured. So, ton of talent as a pass rusher, it seems like.
Yep. And then I believe we have a couple of linebackers to talk about.
Yeah. I've got Jaden Keller. He's probably the most likely to be in this class just because redshirt senior. So the other guy is Caleb Woodson that we'll get to in a minute. And he's only going to be a junior. He may be in the next class, but we'll talk about him. But Keller, 6'3", 235. He actually led the team in tackles with 83 last year. Good length and quickness. I think he needs to probably add a little more weight, a little more functional strength, probably hold up better as a run defender. But both these guys are highly athletic at linebacker. And I think Keller, he's just one of those guys that is very instinctive, knows how to see ball, get ball, and make plays. And he seemed like he was decent in coverage from the games that I was watching as well. So I think he's a guy that definitely could be like a day 3 type linebacker pick. And if he continues to build off of 83 tackles from the season before, I'm sure he's definitely on teams' radars as a day 3 linebacker.
Yeah, I agree with all that. He has a nose for the ball, like you mentioned. I think he had 2 fumble recoveries. I think that's what he ended up with this season. And he showed up in big games. He played very well against Rutgers, Syracuse, and especially against Boston College. So I agree he probably needs to, get a little stronger, but he's somebody who could benefit this season by just playing in a new system, playing in what did you say he had 83 tackles
80,
last
yeah.
year? Yeah, 83 tackles last year. He builds upon that. He had a couple, I think he had 2 tackles for loss. I'm not completely sure, but I know he had the 2 fumble recoveries, 1.5 or 2 tackles for loss. But he's somebody who can build upon last season. If he does that, he could be, somebody who we're talking about, day 3 in the draft or even day 2. If you lead a team like them and they actually get some bowl game plays, which they were lucky to last year. But if they can, put this together, it's just so much unknown with, the new coordinators and the new players, but he is probably the leader of the defense going into the season.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then Woodson, Caleb Woodson, another linebacker, 6'3", listed at 227, so even a little smaller, but I think he's even more athletic. He's only a junior. He did have a breakout 2024, 72 tackles, very athletic, sideline to sideline range. I do think he needs to improve pursuit angles. That was something on tape that I saw. And I think more than likely right now, he's probably a 2027 draft guy. He's probably 2 years away, but you never know. Maybe he absolutely blows up this season and ends up deciding to come out. So it's definitely a guy to keep an eye on. And if you're just a fan of college football, and you're watching their defense. So they're both of those linebackers. I think they wear like number 20 and 24. So.
Yeah, he had the second most tackles on the team last year, I think.
I think so.
With 72. He's also, you mentioned his size, he's also a converted safety. So he'll probably benefit from, just playing the position, another season.
Yeah.
So between the linebackers and the defensive linemen that we've talked about, specifically the front 7 players. So my project today was like going through the entire defensive line class and being able to sort through, can we cover who are the top 64 and can we cover them, each of those 64 in a podcast? Well, that failed. Okay. So there are about 95 to 105 defensive linemen in this class that a draft professor has given a draftable grade to. It's crazy. So going back to like what Dale and David were saying, so for Gilliam or Bell, to, let's say, get drafted, this is going to be a really good year for defensive linemen. It's going to be, it may not be as good at the top as last year's, but rounds 2, 3, and 4 will more than make up for it. And like I said, we're sorting through from preseason scouting. We're sorting through about 105 to 120 players with draftable grades. And then linebacker, after that, I believe we're at 50 linebackers with draftable grades from different draft professors, which is like the average number of linebackers that's drafted is 25. So we're 2x over what the average number of linebackers that are drafted are. Now, granted, we miss on Sean Dolak, right? Didn't get drafted or whatever. But this is looking, the front 7 in this year's draft is looking to be really strong. It's top heavy and deep all the way through round 7.
That's the thing. Every team brings in a bunch of undrafted free agents, right? So when you cover these guys, even the ones that don't get drafted, hey, we've talked about these guys a little bit. Here's a little bit about them when your team takes them, and over a year from now, and you can say, hey, here's a little bit about them, even though they went undrafted because no one else talked about them. When you cover that many, you cast a wide net, especially this early because you don't know who's going to come out, who's not going to come out. So, yeah, numbers are definitely going to be very high at this point when you're talking about all these players.
Yeah, and it's probably better to have a high number at this time of year. Ironically, corner is the exact opposite. We're struggling to find what we would consider to be an adequate number of corners to have a solid, let's say, are we 50 corners deep on our board? We're not that deep yet, kind of thing. So David, you want to take a minute and let everybody know about your great draft website and all the other work that you do?
Sure. Before we move on, did we discuss Isaiah Cash at all?
Oh, you're right. We missed one player. Thank you.
I couldn't remember.
I was checking them off, but only in my head. Yeah, let's do Isaiah Cash, and then you can go to your commercial.
All right. He had 67 tackles, 2 interceptions, 10 pass breakups, and a 77.4 PFF grade last year. He was I believe it's a Sam Houston State transfer.
Sam Houston Bearcats with a K in for cats, which is interesting. Didn't know that, to be honest.
It is. The notes that I had, and this is just coming from one of the scouts, said that he reads defenses well. He makes good breaks on the ball when it's in the air, and he's a ball hawk who is also a solid tackler. One of the reasons it looks like Cash transferred over to Tech, he was quoted as saying, having a position coach at VT who's been in the NFL and knows what it takes for a guy like me to get there was a huge factor in my decision. So it looks like he's, relishing the opportunity to play, there with Sam. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Seifkes, the defensive coordinator there, who used to be a linebacker coach for the Arizona Cardinals. But he is definitely, excited for the opportunity. He had 217 total tackles, it looks like, during his time there. But they're excited to bring him in. But that is about all I have on him.
Yeah, and that's another guy that I have not watched yet, but it looks like another guy that's going to be like a 6-year senior. So I don't know if he spent all 5 years at Sam Houston there, if he's been at a couple spots. But what stands out too is last year 10 passes defense, and is he playing corner or safety for them? Do you know where he's listed on Virginia Tech's depth chart?
I have him listed as safety.
Okay, and it's impressive for a corner or a safety with 10 passes defense. I know it's the same Houston, but still that number stood out to me, and I'm like, yeah, that's worth mentioning. Obviously it tells you he's got pretty good ball skills.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, they were excited to get him. I'm with you though. I have not watched him, so I'm just going by what I was told.
Yeah, listed at 6 foot 195, so that's a little more on him. But yeah, so somebody to watch, and coming from a smaller school, he's going to have an opportunity on a much larger platform. Like a lot of these transfers, it sounds like that they got, some of them coming from already big schools, but some of these guys from smaller programs, as you mentioned, 30 transfers, quite a few.
Yeah, just a few.
And David, do you have a breakdown as to like how many of those transfers are eligible for 2027 versus 2026?
Well, there's a lot of them that are eligible, like what was the guy we just mentioned at linebacker, Caleb Woodson. There's a lot of tweeners like that could be, but I only had 14 that were like surefire, like one way or another, this is it this season for them.
Got it.
Last year eligibility type guys.
Yeah.
So we just covered, I believe I counted 14 players at Virginia Tech, or 13 players and a kicker, depending on how you
Kickers are people too, Jim.
Yes, they are. But this goes to show, like I said, I love being able to do the deep dives on a specific college because we can kind of zero in, and we gave a lot of day 3 players 2 or 3 minutes, and like ESPN and the other publications won't even mention them.
Right.
I mean, ESPN doesn't even talk about day 3 of the draft when they're broadcasting the draft.
No.
They're definitely not going to talk about them before. So that's what we're doing. I believe next week it's Michigan State. But before we go into what we're doing next week, David, you want to let everybody know who you are, let them know about your great draft website and everything else.
Sure. You can follow everything I do at PHL Eagle News. If you want to go to the website, it's called phillycovercorner.com, but it's a lot more than just Eagles. It's a lot of analytics on there. If you go to the website and you don't want to read anything about the Eagles, just hit analytics at the top of the website and you'll surpass everything Philadelphia. And it's got draft value data on there, positional data, general manager data, like all of their trends and performance grades, player value, insights. There's a how to use this site part that I still have to click on myself to understand half of my own information. So it's all there, and it's pretty interesting stuff. If you're into the draft, go check it out. Greg Hart developed a lot of this. He's really great at this. So if you have the time and you want to go look at it, and you can search by years. The draft value database goes all the way back to 2000. So you can look up the values for all of it. It's pretty interesting stuff if you're a draft psycho like the 3 of us on this show.
Yeah, and I know that there's several Bengals fans in the chat. You would be able to go to Philadelphia. Is it Philly Cover Corner?
Philly Cover Corner, yeah.
phillycovercorner.com. You would be able to look up the Bengals GM's draft history and the ratings. And here would be an example. Like, I love David's database and his website because you'll be able to see that Howie Roseman focuses on premium positions. You'll be able to find out if a certain GM likes taking running backs in round 1. That data is in his database. So, like, if you really geek out on the draft and you want to know how does a specific GM draft, check Philly Cover Corner out. And if you have questions, drop them to David or bring them to a podcast, because we could probably even bring up the website on a podcast if you wanted to walk people through it. So
Duke Tobin is their GM, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
First sentence, de facto GM. They don't give him the title.
The first sentence says that he stands out for his steady, patient approach to team building. But you can look at everything he's prioritized, all his positional priority. They've taken, it looks like 2 wide receivers in round 1 during his tenure, 1 defensive edge. It's all there, and it is pretty interesting. Again, if you're into that, and it'll show you all the grades and how it's stacked up to all the other 31 GMs.
Yeah, that's fair.
Dale, you want to let everybody know who you are and how they can find your other content?
Just Bengals and Brews. Follow me at Bengals Brews. I do a draft guide for Project Game Day. So if you want that, you can just send me a message. I've got all the links through at Bengals Brews on Twitter. Get in touch with me that way. Yeah.
And your draft guide was great. You sent it to me last week, I think, and I spent way more hours than I care to admit going over that. I don't know how many pages that was. It was hundreds upon hundreds of pages.
Yeah.
It is insane.
For very early on, I think I had like 299 players in there, and then I like to add to it. I think I had some charts on there too, some PFF
you
charts.
Did, yeah.
That I had at the end, but I try to update those, through the cycle. I've just tried to add more to it each year. So
it's incredible, and the fact
that
you're only asking for a $5 donation for that is remarkable value, man. And the charity that you did, like I even told you, I'm going to try to set it up in Philly. I think it's absolutely amazing what you've done, man. Kudos to you.
That'd be awesome, man. Yeah, and all the guys that do it, there's a whole bunch of us. So shout out to all those guys, man. They're fantastic. I try to do my small part with the draft guide and stuff.
Yeah, well, that draft guide is no small part. I spent hours and didn't get through a third of it. Yeah, it is amazing. That is really, really great.
Thank you.
I use the draft guide from Dale in part to try to make sure who we're covering on the podcast. So what I would like everybody to know is Draft Professor has daily draft content. We will be literally podcasting every day from now until the draft. So right now it's one podcast a day, right? So we're doing college breakdowns Monday, Tuesday. We're doing team breakdowns Wednesday, Thursday. Specifically this Wednesday, we're breaking down the Jets and the Bengals. Parker Blake is going to be joining for the Bengals part. But specifically what we're doing is, okay, what schemes does a team run? Like inside zone, outside zone? What is their base defense? How would we define the players that fit that base defense? And then look at the draft class, and did our draft grades for those players reflect the schemes that the team runs? We had a really interesting discussion last week with Miami with Jonas Savanea, because Miami runs outside zone, and I don't know too many draft people that said Savanea would be an outside zone offensive tackle, but we concluded that if you put a big tackle in a guard, you can have big guards for outside zone, and that was how the podcast evolved. So just deep discussions. Those are Wednesday and Thursday every week. Friday, we break down quarterbacks. And starting in October, we will be breaking down approximately 450 players in the NFL draft. 8 players per podcast, 2 podcasts a day, 7 days a week. Kind of thing. So, David took part in that last year. We have 22 draft professors that are putting that out, that are putting out those, what is it? I think I counted 11 podcasts a week. So that's what we do. So if you want to find out information on the players, you will be able to find that information on nearly every player here.
Do you ever sleep, Jim? Or no?
No.
No, you couldn't possibly. Every time I open Twitter, I see your face doing a live broadcast. I'm like, good grief. If it's 4 a.m, if it's 9 a.m., it's every time I turn on my computer. I'm like, there he is again. Pretty impressive.
Subliminal advertising. See, it's working. I'm sucking you in.
Yes.
Kind of thing. So, yeah. So daily draft content. We're having a lot of fun here. I'm having the time of my life doing this. This is like way more fun than my day job. Way more fun. So that being said, for Dale, David, myself, for the 80 podcasters at the Draft Professor, thanks for watching, everybody. And we will see you for Michigan State next Monday.
See you guys.